Folks, welcome to the Chapter 6 of Survivors and Parents of Murdered Children. As a side note, my wife does all the editing and a lot of the research for this, and I also help her. But she comes up, so I tell her what we're going to do, what we're going to talk about. And then she'll come up with the titles, with these chapter titles. And this one is called, While the World Mourns Murderers, We Still Mourn the Murdered. And it has to do with something that I want to bring up on this during this conversation. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Ray. We have Nick, who is a survivor. We have co-host Deb. She is the chapter leader of the POMC. However, she does not represent the POMC during this podcast, and neither do I, neither does Nick. We are here by our own volition to celebrate and highlight the ones that we have lost. And this is an extension of how I see myself helping others by extending the meeting out in an electronic format on YouTube, where people who may not be able or want to attend a POMC meeting can still relate, can listen to Nick's story, can listen to Deb's, my story, and the countless others that we've had. And they can at least find some solace in the fact that, oh man, those are some of the same thoughts that I've had. You know, we were just talking about how murder's not right, but him and I both would murder the ones that murdered ours. You know, and right? But it's an interesting perspective, because it's an opinion, and you know, you don't really understand that until one of yours is murdered, and you go, wow.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I know Roy and I could.
I have two daughters, and I'm only going to say that one would be able to do it. She said if they told her who it was, she would shoot him point blank. I myself couldn't do that. I don't know if it's because I think with emotions, or because I don't think my son would want me to do that.
Okay.
But I do believe in accountability, and I think if I knew 100% who the two murderers were that shot my son in the back, and I knew that someone murdered them, I'd be perfectly fine with it.
I would be okay with that result.
I would
Yeah.
perfectly fine with
We were talking about in the meeting, like, you know, when you find out there's been a murder in the jail, you're like a lottery winner. You're like, oh, hopefully it's my guy. Okay, so trigger warning, folks. This episode contains graphic and emotionally distressing content, including discussions of violent crime, murder, and loss. Listener discretion is strongly advised, especially for survivors and families of victims. Please take care of yourself while listening. Again, the disclaimer, the views and the opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Parents of Murdered Children, POMC, or any affiliated organizations. Let's see. Today we bring the spotlight back to the lives behind the headlines. Victims are often overlooked in media coverage. We'll begin with stories that represent so many who were lost. Then our conversation shifts to the Byron Black controversy, the inmate in Tennessee who was just put to death. Not to focus on the crime, but to explore how the narrative around perpetrators often overshadows the victims. Finally, Nick will help us remember Sean for the life he lived and the impact he left. Okay. All right. So I did want to bring up the Byron Black, because I found this, and it affects the title of the show. While the world mourns murderers, we mourn the murdered. And I found it interesting that when this guy, there was a debate on his electronic defibrillator implanted device in his chest, on whether it was going to cause him pain while they were injecting him with the lethal dose to put him to death. And I can read from the article from CNN, but I paraphrase it by saying there were people gasping who were watching it, because they
had a choice to watch it.
Yeah, right. But apparently the Byron Black was gasping in pain and saying, "Oh, it hurts." If you look at the details of why he was on death row for murder, he killed 3 people. He killed his girlfriend, and he killed a 9-year-old, and he killed a 6-year-old. I'm just going off of memory. I know for sure it was a 6-year-old, because that's why he got the death penalty, was for the murder of the 6-year-old. And I immediately thought, everybody's crying out for this guy in pain, while they're lethally injecting him. Well, what was that 6-year-old crying out for? What were her last words? What was her last breath? What did that sound like? They dropped that, but they immediately focus on this guy. Oh, well, he's in pain. Well, look at the severity of his crime. Right? So that's another reason for the podcast, is to highlight some of these details that people just forget when it comes to parole time, when it comes time to talk about lethal injection for this individual. That's just one subject. If you guys have something to say about that.
Do they think because we feel that it was just, that's what he was sentenced to have, death, right? Do they feel that because we don't feel the same way they feel, that we're callous and that we don't care and that we don't feel bad? I don't feel bad for that. I would feel bad for somebody that, was remorseful, was regretful,
Right.
was accountable. I would feel bad for that.
And we talked about accountability. And what accountability looks like to me is the second someone makes that mistake of committing murder, right?
Mm-hmm. Taking ownership.
They take ownership the second the cops get there and they go, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I did it. I want to suffer the consequences and the repercussions because I murdered this individual. You don't need to have a trial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty. How often does that ever happen? Because we talked about Raquel, and I'm sorry, Raquel, I know you're here, but we're talking about her case also, where the guy was allegedly drunk when he shot, Charlene multiple times in the face, right?
I'm sure we've all been kind of tipsy and not thought of murdering anybody.
But apparently that was part of his defense, is he was so drunk he didn't know what he was doing, but he knew enough to run outside when the cops got there and go, I don't know what happened. So he knew enough to go, oh, I better not cope to this one.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't do the opposite. Mm-hmm. He didn't sign up for accountability class and show up and go, I did it. Arrest me. You don't have to look for anyone else. Look at the GSR, the gunshot residue. It's all over my hands. I did it. So that's what accountability looks like to me. So that we never get that. Because then they sit through the trial. Like I said, they sit through the trial with an attorney who's representing them. Mm-hmm. And that attorney then spins some BS story on how this person is not guilty of murder. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should look elsewhere.
Right.
So the whole defense system is not built around accountability. So that I have a hard time with that. So they do the prison time, and they get taught how to get out, how to qualify for parole, but they're not accountable. Mm-hmm. Because like I said also in the meeting, you talk to anybody in jail, they're all innocent. Mm-hmm. They didn't do what they're in jail for.
I've been to several sentencing hearings for families and listened, and I can tell you I have not heard one person that was found guilty at the time and the family got to do their impact statement, and they asked the murderer if he had anything to say. There was never, ever in any of the ones that I've attended that they've said they were sorry or remorseful.
What do you think about Nick? What do you think about that? What do you think about that inmate in Tennessee? Did you know about that story before I even brought it up? Or?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I agree with you in terms of accountability. If they're admit right away or some type of a remorseful, yes, I did it. These are the reasons, regardless, right or wrong. But to me, that would be taking accountability, of the situation, I guess you could say.
We've all lied.
Yeah.
News break, I've lied. But and we've all done things we're not proud of ourselves, but I know myself, I can reflect on my mistakes and go, I did cope to my mistakes. Mm-hmm. I'm the first one to say, man, I effed up. Mm-hmm. The first one to say, I'll tell you exactly how I did it and what words I used, and because you can't heal, you can't grow until you recognize that within yourself. Mm-hmm. Like that whole adage, you point at someone, well, there's like 3 fingers pointed back at you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, another one I wanted to talk about, I don't know if you guys heard about this. This was Tristan Bailey. She, 13-year-old in Florida, and she disappeared on March 20th, 2021 from a local park in Florida. Mm-hmm. She was found deceased days later. So, the guy who killed her was a 14-year-old kid also,
I did hear about
who lured her into the park and stabbed her 114 times, and she had over 40 defensive wounds on her arms. And that during the trial, they were already talking about when he qualified for parole. And I thought, are you listening to yourselves? Like, do you realize what that had to have sounded like when he was stabbing her 114 times, and what she must have been pleading for? And this guy, you're already, oh, well, he's 25 years old.
Because they want to save him now. They want to reform him because the person that's deceased. It doesn't matter.
Newsbreak, folks. Not everybody is a
care.
crying baby that needs to be coddled and taken care of. There are some crying babies out there that will, when you look at them, they're really just the devil and they're the evil. They're not a crying baby, and not everybody needs to be helped and rehabbed.
Well, not everybody can be either.
Right. And like their own statistics, like we talked about,
Right.
it shows like 60% will reoffend. 66%
It went up.
will reoffend. And there's some shenanigans in that number too, because they're in that industry, they're always looking to turn that number down. They're always looking to turn that number down. But if they're still getting 66%, that means there has to be a high point, right?
Yeah.
Like a couple weeks, it's 70%, right? They reoffend within 3 to 5 years. Okay, so.
Numbers are not in our favor.
No. Yeah, that's
And-
why parole is great. No.
I was gonna say, to add to that, I kind of feel like that puts us, or say for example, the little girl's father or sibling, that puts us in a very bad position if they're released 20, 25 years later, because like I mentioned earlier, if 25 years down the line, if I'm out and I see one of the people that murdered Sean in the store, how do you think I'm going to react? I'm not going to, I can't guarantee that I won't try to, get some type of revenge because he's still here. I'm looking at him and Sean's not. So that, I feel that puts us in a very bad position as well. So I don't know if they're
I always
taking that into
wonder-
account.
Yeah, I always wonder when the parole hearings come around. It's like, does the person standing at the or sitting at the table conducting the parole hearing, do they want that person to move next to them?
Yeah, exactly.
You see? Ask them that question. Hey, would you want that person to move next to you because you're advocating for their parole? So then they're free to move wherever they want, correct? What if they move next to you?
Oh, hell no.
What if they had all the money in the world because they got an inheritance after they got out of jail and they moved next to Newsom?
Well,
I'm sure that wouldn't happen. I'm sure that wouldn't happen. They're not going to allow that to happen. Okay. Last one is Elijah Hearn. He's the 5-year-old in, I think, Panorama City or Pacoima.
Right.
This was on July 12th of 2025 in Panorama City. His body was found near a dumpster. And he was described as kind. He was autistic and curious, always playing and learning. And I guess there was one arrest in that, and it was the boyfriend.
Boyfriend.
Yeah.
Right. What do you guys think about that?
tell you what I'm.
It sounds a little bit like Peaky.
Right.
It was very reminiscent because there was abuse leading up to and all that. There was a custody issue, I'm sure, and very reminiscent.
System failed.
Right.
I think my thoughts are going to what you said when I had sent you some other families that would like to do the podcast. And I think you asked for some information, and I sent you some, and I think your response was, each case seems to be worse and worse and worse.
No, I say that every time. Is the last story I just heard was bad. The one before that was bad enough.
Right, that's what your words.
And like every story that I hear, I'm like, damn. But these are the people that, that are getting paroled. So, okay. Yeah, so that Byron Black, I know I'm jumping around here, but so he murdered those 3 people while he was on a work release program for already being arrested for domestic violence. So while he was on the work release program, that rehabilitation program they love to talk about,
There's a bunch of holes in those programs, right?
broke into the Nashville home of his girlfriend, Angela Clay, and tragically murdered her and her 2 young daughters, LaToya, 9, and LaKeisha, 6. He was convicted in 1989, sentenced to death for LaKeisha's murder, and given life sentences for the other 2.
But he's going to get a credit somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
And
Well, no, he's put to death already.
Well,
Yeah.
if it was now, he would be given credits, playbooks, opportunities to be reformed.
Right.
Obviously, he wasn't, and he couldn't be.
So I wanted to talk about that because it's the case that somehow symbolizes how the sensationalism of criminal justice can overshadow human dignity. And it echoed like a painful truth. While headlines fixate on executions, the victims and their families often fade into the background. So, Deb, how does focusing on the perpetrator affect survivors and families that you've talked with?
I think I mentioned to you that because I've been with the organization for 18 years, and the very person that told me about the organization has passed,
Okay.
as well as her husband.
Yeah.
There's a handful of families that I know now that are dealing with cancer, and I believe that because of the trauma that we go through and our life sentence, that our immune system is down,
And that's 100% true.
and we don't have once your immune system is down, it attacks you.
Goodbye, Raquel.
And even though we focus, or we advocate for us to continue living and to continue honoring and find joy in your life, as you know, the birth of your daughter maybe wasn't as joyful as it should have been or could have been because of the murder of Sean. So it takes away a lot of the joy that you should be having in your life, or being able to celebrate. People have strokes, heart attacks, but nobody cares about us as a survivor. And I think that's a name they gave us to make them feel better that we survived, because we weren't the one that was murdered. I think it helps them feel better that we're survivors. I think we're leftovers and remnants. I advocate for joy. I say that. Don't let them kill us too.
Right.
And don't stay alive just so that you could have justice. And you can only live for you. At the end of the day, I can't live for my son because he's not here. I can't live for my husband. I can't live for my kids. I can't live for anybody other than myself. But I do find purpose, and I find strength in trying to advocate for others, because I don't see justice in the horizon. And that's because the system effed me. Because they're saying my son's case isn't worth investigating more because of the cost that it does to look at a case. And I've been told we've spent countless hours on this, and I realize because of the lack of witnesses and stuff like that, it is hard. But I also know that my son was shot in the back, which was never told to me by the police department. And I found out by reading the coroner's
report. Yep.
And so I just don't like to open up that wound over and over again. So I try to lean on faith, and I struggle with that because I say, okay, I'm gonna let God handle it, and then I take it back and try to do my own and say, okay, it's God's timing, and take it back, and so it's a head game, Yeah. But it kills people.
Yeah.
It kills you internally.
Yeah. When you yes, when you watch it, the focus go from the victims to the perpetrators. It's like, like I always like to say, you can be brought back to day one very quickly. And every time, man, I say this every show, like within the last 2 weeks, I've had a time where I had to retreat and I had to go hide, go deal with it myself.
It comes, and it comes when we don't even know it's going to come.
Right. So again, I'd like to put this out there, the notification that we are not representing the POMC. We are talking about our own experiences here as survivors, and we do not officially represent the POMC in any fashion.
But they are welcome to attend a support group meeting.
Everybody is welcome. That's the whole kind of the point of this show also, is to extend some help out there for folks who may not want to come in to reach for it. They want a hand, but they don't want to reach out for that hand. They just, might be okay just listening and relating. I think this show is great for relating. I was just telling Nick, we don't advertise, and every one of the shows has the first one has over 100 views, and every one of them have about 60 to 70, if I'm correct. I was telling Nick, there's not 60 or 70 people sitting here on the meeting.
I meet families in the park.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Like obviously it's reaching someone. It's working in some fashion. So as long as I keep doing that, then the purpose is there, and I stand against parole. And we can't talk about specific Senate bills like we talked about, but we can talk about some of the details of them and say, hey, out there, educate yourself. This is happening. We're not going to tell you how to vote, but we're going to tell you how all the negatives about this one specific Senate bill we're not going to name. We can do everything we can to talk about it, but not address it directly.
Educate yourself.
Right. And like I said, you're so busy with life. What time do you have to go look for all these things? Especially if you're a survivor. What time do you have to go look for all this information and all this data? You don't. Sometimes it's good to have it localized, at least in one place where you might want to listen to it. So that's why we do this here. All right. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
Yeah, hanging in there.
So while we were talking earlier, I recorded that part of the conversation too. And I thought that was great insight. I feel like you and I haven't never really directly talked since you've been here. And I've been looking forward to it. Because, there's a lot of moms here, but there's few dads or cousins or, you know what I'm saying? And I'm sure out there in YouTube land or wherever, there's a lot of fathers who, I'm not going to go to that meeting. You know what I mean? That's what I thought for a while. Is like when I went to therapy, because I have a therapist too, I didn't know anything about the POMC. And then one time she told me, she said, hey, I can help you to a certain point, but have you ever heard of POMC? This is what they do. And I thought it was fantastic, like finding this here. But I want to ask you, like I do with every guest here, I say, introduce yourself, however you'd like, and let's talk about Sean Killian.
Okay. My name is Nick. Sean, like I mentioned, cousins, yes, but we were more like brothers. I considered him my little brother. We've been close our whole lives.
Playing basketball since you were 6.
Playing basketball, yeah. I know that. Lived together several times, throughout our lives from childhood to adulthood. So we were really close. He was my brother, not just a cousin. That was my definitely big part of my life. He, as I've mentioned to my therapist, he was like a huge part of my childhood and adulthood, but like all my childhood memories, middle school, high school, he was there. So, that's still doesn't feel real. I still feel like I'm dreaming, every
For like
day.
the first 6 months, dude, with me, no joke, I would wake up in the morning and go, that it was a dream. Like, no joke, I would wake up and go, that was a dream.
So
was that a dream? No joke, I would ask myself, and it was just the weirdest thing because I did it over and over and over.
No, I was going to say yes, because Sean was very famous for. I would always joke with him. He was a very early bird, I guess you could say. So he would randomly text me like at 5:30 in the morning, like a meme or something, or just something random. And yeah, even still to this day, I'll randomly look at my phone to see if I get a text from him. So yeah, but no, that was definitely, he was my brother. Yeah, still feels unreal. I guess you could say with the, stages of grief, I kind of go back and forth with denial and acceptance. Even when everything happened, I remember, just like yesterday, it was a Sunday. I was folding laundry. I was at the house by myself. My wife was at work, and I knew Sean played basketball every Sundays at the park around the corner from his house. And I want to say probably like a month before, because, like I mentioned to you, I stopped playing a few years ago. He, brought up like, hey, come out of retirement, come and play with me or whatever. And I had told him like, oh, I'm too old to be playing at parks or whatever. And then I was like, but if you find a gym, maybe I'll come out of retirement. I'll play, come and play one of these days. So he said that, oh, well, he doesn't know of any gyms, since COVID and everything. A lot of the places we used to play at, the different schedule with, when people would come. So he asked me, oh, well, try to find a gym out by you. I'll, drive out to you, because he lives in L.A. I now, live in Orange County. Mm-hmm. So then, fast forward a month. I'm at the house, I'm doing laundry. And then at 11:30, I get a call from his sister saying, oh, Sean was shot at the park. So immediately I'm like, well, what? So I'm like, okay, I'm headed there. So I just throw on some sweats, run to my car, get in the car, start driving, and I called, his sister back, was like, please, tell me he's still breathing or whatever. Since my Sean's sister and, Sean's mother, they lived, right around the corner from the park. They got there before the ambulance and the police did.
Oh, wow.
So when I, called and spoke to his sister again, she was like, yeah, they're with him. He's still alert. He's still talking. So I'm like, okay, little sigh of relief. I'm like, okay, well, let me know when the ambulance gets there. Let me know, where the ambulance is going to take him. So I get on the freeway. I call her back maybe 5 minutes later. And then she was like, yeah, they just got him. They're taking him to such and such hospital. I was like, tell me he's still alert and breathing and talking. And she's like, yeah. So the whole drive to the hospital.
Brother, you ain't got nothing to be sorry about at all.
The whole drive to the hospital, it never crossed my mind that, he wouldn't be okay. So I get to the hospital, probably, what should have been like a 30-minute drive. I got there in like, 20 minutes. I was speeding like crazy. So I was able to park right in front. And like I said, the whole time I'm thinking, okay, he's going to be okay. So as I'm getting out of the car, I see, our uncle and his girlfriend walking out of the hospital, crying, and I was like, hey, is he okay? And they were like, no, like he didn't make it. So I told him, I was like, no, that's denial. I was like, no, his sister said, he was fine. So I go into the hospital and I see, my aunt and grandma, and they were like, yeah, they said he didn't make it. So it was more so shock, because I was like, no, that can't be right. Not to blame his sister or anything, but I was like, no, she told me like he was talking, he was, fine. So then, I immediately go back outside and I don't know what to do with myself. Immediately, I see one of a few of Sean's friends that, also came up to the hospital, and they're crying, they're hugging me, and they're like, I don't know what to say. And it's just, it doesn't feel, I'm still in shock. I'm like, nah, I was like, nah, this, they have the wrong person. So then.
That's the one thing I say about murder is it can't be explained. It has to be experienced.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then I'm, standing outside because my uncle was still outside talking to people. And then, he comes back over and hugs me. Still, the whole time, I'm like, they have the wrong person. Like, I'm like, that can't be. Like, it doesn't even make sense. So
Even right now, looking at you, I almost think that you're still thinking that too.
Yeah.
I can see it in your face.
From time to time, I still do feel that it's a big mistake. That it's the wrong person. But yeah. So then, I told my uncle, I was like, I'm gonna find him. I'm gonna kill him because I'm like, I'm in shock because it started to sink in a little bit because I was outside with him. So then I go back inside, and it's one of those things where time was like moving slowly, like everyone was moving slow. And then I go and it's like my aunt's there, his mother, and it's like, I don't know, like, what do I do? She's there crying, and now my aunt's not a crier at all. She's crying, so it's just like, I think we could all feel like that helpless feeling because it's like, I don't know what to do. So then we ended up staying a little bit longer at the hospital because basically what ended up happening, Sean was at the park with one of our close family friends.
Right.
He was at the park too, so they were, we were waiting for him to leave together because the sheriffs were interviewing him for what seemed like forever, asking, what happened. Mm-hmm. So then, after they finished interviewing him, that's when I was standing with my grandma, and my grandma told him, because he didn't know, because, he was with the sheriffs the whole time, like, Sean didn't make it. And then he broke down because he was in shock too, because, like I said, he was still talking and, alert up until he got into the ambulance. So then, I asked him, like, what happened? And he was just saying that pretty much Sean had just gone to the park probably 5 minutes before, the shooters came in the park, but he got there 5 minutes. He was by his car, and he was talking to one of the other guys that they play basketball with. They were at their cars talking. He didn't even, make it to go into the basketball court yet. Mm. And then he said, then next thing you know, a car, speeds into the parking lot, and 3 guys get out and, start shooting at everyone. And it just so happened that Sean and one other person were the only ones shot, and that's because how the parking lot is set up, they're the closest to... Mm-hmm. But, Sean was the only one that didn't make it. The other guy survived. And then, I just remember I got home. I sat in my car for about 2 hours, didn't answer the phone, from anyone. My wife was worried, my mom, because, they didn't know where I was at. But in reality, I was, in my car in the garage, just sat there for 2 hours. And then I want to say probably the whole next week or two is just a blur. I don't really remember anything. But, what gets me, and I still deal with this guilt on a daily basis, is, I go back and I just started thinking to myself, he asked me to find a gym. If I would have found a gym, there's a chance he wouldn't have been at the park that day. Mm. So I know I shouldn't, my therapist says not to, but I do beat myself up on that a lot because, to me, like I said, he was my little brother, and, in my eyes, big brothers are supposed to protect their little brothers and be there for them. Mm. And, I know there was nothing I could have done, but I still can't help but feel that way that I let him down.
Right.
So...
And I'm sure that's a common thought too,
Yes, I'm not getting those thoughts as often, but I still get them, I guess you could say weekly, like, there had to have been something I, could have done to protect him, I should have found a gym so that, he wasn't at the park that day. But, it's still a struggle for me every day. That's why I'm in therapy, and I, come here to, help, because I was very, very, very angry and mad, like, for those first few months after. Like, I was just pissed off. Not as much now, but, at that point, I was very pissed off to the point where the family was very worried about me that, I was going to, do something stupid, because I was actively trying to find out, what happened, like, who did this, But it's...
And I'm sure a lot of the fathers and male survivors, because I'm agreeing with you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm looking at your shirt. I already commented about this, but he's wearing a Batman shirt. And I told him about the speech that I gave at the vigil one time. And I looked out to the crowd and I said, all I see is a bunch of Bruce Waynes out in the crowd, is because we all kind of have experienced that. We all kind of do in our own way, like seek some sort of vengeance, So I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts like that. I'm glad that you actually shared that, because that's probably one of the relatable points for other male survivors who don't go to meetings. They don't talk about that stuff, so they don't go, "Oh, that's a normal thought." No, they just think, "Oh, I'm crazy because I wanted to kill the guy." No, sir, your son or your loved one was murdered, of course. And we talked in the meeting earlier about when did it change to where, back in the old days, it was literally an eye for an eye. So when did it change to where it was, no, it's not an eye for an eye anymore. We have to take care of the murderer and disregard the survivors and the victims. And, when did that change? When, back in the old days, in the old Western days, if someone came on your property, shh, not here, friend. You know what I mean? So just when did it change? When did all that change to where it was more about the murderers than it was the victims, So.
Yes. And, to also elaborate a little bit more on that point, I'm not really like a violent guy like that. So that makes me feel kind of shitty. Sorry if I could, for cussing, but...
No, there's no censor here.
Because I'm not that guy, but I feel like I have those thoughts, so then that messes with me too. Like, am I any better than them? Like, yes, we know right from wrong, but then there's a point where I'm kind of like, well, for me, at times it feels, going down the wrong path in terms of handling it myself, or what they did to my brother feels right. But then again, it's like, then am I looked at as like the monster because I'm taking someone's loved one? So that kind of messes with me too. But then I think to myself, well, obviously their loved one didn't care about my loved one, so why should I care? So it's just like this whole revolving, nonstop stuff that goes through my head all the time.
There was a survivor here a few weeks ago who was talking about how she was having a hard time with whether or not she should forgive the people who murdered her. So I don't know if you remember. And my answer to her was...
We hear a lot of that.
Yeah, and my answer to her was, I don't think you should occupy yourself with that thought, because you're not perfect. And I'm not perfect. And I'm religious. I'm coming out again, so I go to church and stuff like that. The one thing I do know is I'll never be perfect. So I can't forgive. I can't just indiscriminately forgive evil. It's not in me. I'm not Christ. I'm not whatever God you want to say. I ain't perfect. So my thoughts are going to go to that, because I think that's common sense. Like we just talked about, it used to be eye for an eye. So when did that stop? Because with you and me and Roy and every other father that I've spoken to, like Joe Abbott, okay, these are all guys who, trust me, we all think the same way, sir. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, it's definitely rough. It's every day. My grandma mentioned, because she'll text me and ask how I'm doing, and I just reply, yeah, I'm okay. And she was like, oh, you never respond, you're good or anything. And it's like, well, I'm not. I mean, I'm admitting it to myself. I have okay days and I have bad days. And then to elaborate a little bit off of what you were saying on what I do to, help occupy.
yeah.
Goes back to what Deborah was saying in terms of, I have my daughter, which is great, but at the same time, I kind of feel bad because sometimes I feel like I'm not fully there, because I'm thinking to myself, like, hey, like, Sean with his son Madden, they used to FaceTime me all the time. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to have a kid so I could FaceTime Uncle Sean like he used to FaceTime me all the time. So it's things like that where I kind of feel sad and just not in the moment as much as I should be, because it's kind of like the joy is kind of like...
It's tainted.
Yes, it's tainted because, he used to joke with me and my wife all the time, like, oh, we're messing up the program. We should have had kids at the same time. So it's kind of like now that we do have a daughter and he's not here, it kind of makes me feel really, I don't want to say bad, but it just makes me not feel, hopefully this doesn't come across bad, but not as happy as I should be for, having my daughter. Of course, I love her, and, that's pretty much the bright spot that helps me.
Nick, your new reality is different than your reality before Sean was murdered.
Yes.
So it affects your reality from that point on. Mm-hmm. Now everything is different.
Yes.
It's like tainted. Everything. How many times have you said it, Deb? Where you're somewhere and you just think about Jonathan?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time.
There's not a day you don't think about them. But, again, it's 18 years. It's 18 years, so you gotta give yourself some time. That joy will come, and the love will return. But it's all different, my husband actually said that I'm a nicer person now. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but as opposed to what I was before. But he says that I'm a nicer person. I guess maybe because, you're more in tune to people's feelings and stuff like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. If somebody tells me, oh, I know how you feel, and they said their dog died, it's not going to be a good day for them.
There's an old saying from the 16th century that goes, by the grace of God, there go I. You ever heard of that?
Yes.
By the grace of God, there go I. And every time I meet survivors, it's by the grace of God, there go I. Because we think so similarly, and we could also, I could be living your life. I could be living your life because we all have that one thing in common that we shouldn't have in common. And that's something that Wedo, your husband, brought up to me. And I said, I'm going to use that because we all have something in common that we shouldn't have in common.
Right.
And that's what kind of binds us together. So I could be you. You see, you and I have thought the same thoughts. Her and I have thought the same thoughts, And when I first started coming here, I remember thinking, I don't know any of these folks, but I know them. And I can tell,
how I felt,
the first day I got here, I told Deb, I said the first day I got here, I was really prepared to, I was like walking into like a hen house and like, it was, but man, within seconds, it was just like, no, this is it for me. Like, this is, my therapist, Lynn, was 100% correct. You need to go there and experience that, Okay. All right. If anybody else has anything else to say in closing.
Well, I was going to say also what makes this whole, I don't want to call it a nightmare, but it is a nightmare for me. Rough, too, is just how, I know we've mentioned before, too, but just how people, they don't know, so they'll say, inconsiderate things, or, friends who you thought were going to be there have, disappeared. Because I've had, there's, times where I kind of feel like, any day this will be the day that I flip out and lose my shit. Because it's always like that for me every day, because it's just like, like I said, the whole denial aspect of it. But then there's been times like, to give an example, I don't think I've shared this, but the most inappropriate and wrong thing, and granted, they weren't trying to say anything wrong. They were trying to be,
sure,
sympathetic, but yeah, so I returned to work in a couple weeks. I returned to work
I'm dreading what you're going to say.
I know,
dude.
right?
I'm like, what did these effers say? Like,
Well, I returned to work and
Maybe something we haven't heard before.
well,
I've actually heard someone tell me when I was doing time volunteering and going to the events, why the F are you donating so much time to these people? And I thought, what? So I'm dreading what you're going to say right now.
Well, like I said, the intention wasn't bad, but it was one of those things where it's kind of, I thought she should know better because this was a person in a higher position, but I'm at my cubicle, there's other people around, and I hadn't seen this person in a couple of weeks, higher up. So she came and she, gave me her condolences, said, oh, I heard that, your brother/cousin was murdered. So then she said, yeah, I know how you feel. My nephew, he was shot, but he survived. But I know, I get the feeling. And immediately after she said that, I felt my whole body tense up. And then she started talking a little bit more. And then I said, oh, can I excuse myself?
You're like looking at her like, can you shut up now?
Well, I went outside and this is when I knew that I needed to go to therapy, but I almost broke one of the windows, in our building. I almost hit it because I was just so enraged. Like, how the hell? Why would you tell me that?
That's like
your
someone who
nephew
has
survived.
That's like someone who has kids and they go, well, I understand. I have cats.
Yeah.
It's so misplaced.
I was at a celebration this weekend and known this people for 55 years, something like that. And somebody was there and he said to me, I just wanted to tell you, I heard about your boy, I'm sorry to hear that. And I can't imagine what you're going through because I have kids and I don't know how I would feel if that happened. And
that sounds like an honest evaluation.
yeah.
I mean, that's...
But then his closing was, you gotta let this go.
Oh, and then he shit all over it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was waiting for the shoe to drop. I was like, oh, he slaughters this one somewhere.
And I think, because I was shocked that he said it, I didn't or because of the situation or maybe the atmosphere I was in, I kind of shut down and I didn't really respond the way I probably should have responded or, and I was telling Weddle what happened.
Yeah.
And then I said, I think, because I was stunned at who said it, I think my other response would have been and turned it back on him and said, would you let it go? Now that you said you don't know how you would feel or you can't imagine, so think about it. Would you let it go?
If you can't imagine and you don't know how you'd feel, why would you follow it up with that other statement?
Yeah. Well,
you just said two different things.
Yeah. Well, I take into consideration who said it though too.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Oh, well. I was at a birthday party for kids one time and an adult was talking about someone else he knew who had experienced murder. He'd said something exactly like that. And I remember thinking I just how they can't understand how we feel. I can't understand how you just said that. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Why are those words coming out of your mouth? How insensitive can you be to say something like that?
Well, we know there's tons of insensitive people out there because we could write a book on some of the dumb shit that they say.
Oh, of course.
So
we are talking about
we'll
it.
just leave that on the table.
Yeah, another one at work was like, oh, since your cousin passed, I noticed your personality has really changed. And I'm like,
wow.
Well, no shit. I don't know. So luckily those are the only two instances at work, but
those are horrible examples of what people could say though.
Yeah, I don't.
Nick, I always say now it just depends on the relationship that you have with the person on how you're going to respond to them, because sometimes you have to give them, and again, it just depends on the relationship you have with the person. Sometimes you have to give them a little grace because maybe they want to say the right thing, but they don't know how.
Right.
So that's, to me, that's an opportunity for education.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to say, you know what, I know you really care about me, and I know that, you wanted to say something that was going to help me. That wasn't it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I just wanted you to know I do appreciate you trying to do that. Next time.
Shut up. Your opinions don't matter everywhere.
Right.
One thing that my therapist told me that I always remember is that not everybody deserves your attention.
That's true. And not everybody deserves to hear the story of your loved one
No,
either.
that's what I was, took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. That's why you're the co-host. So, but that's exactly right, is not everybody deserves your attention. Not everybody deserves to have this conversation with Nick. Not everybody deserves to have this conversation with me or Deb or Lola. No one,
And
right?
thank you thank you for doing it. Thanks, Shimona, for editing it. Thank you for giving up your time. Thank you for shedding a light, bringing a light, and honoring our loved ones.
That's the point.
Thank you.
That's the point, to discuss these things out in the open and take control of your intrusive thoughts. Like we do here at the meetings, we can say whatever we want on this show also. So, in closing, thank you for listening to this important and heartfelt conversation on survivors and parents of murdered children, the podcast. We're deeply grateful to Nick for sharing Sean's story and to Deb for helping us keep the focus on those taken too soon. Remember, these are real people, not just headlines or case files. If this episode touched you, please share it and help keep their names and legacies alive. If you are struggling with emotions after listening, please seek support from a counselor, trusted friend, or support group. You are not alone. We will continue to amplify the voices of survivors and families. Until next time, be kind to yourself and hold close the memory of those that we have lost.